Hello fellow bookworms, it's Katie. So I'm recording this video for the third time because my camera is just not cooperating at all. Anyways, let's try again. I hope this time it records what I'm saying because this is actually a really great topic that I really want to talk about. Today I want to talk to you about YA literature in general and YA literature here in Booktube and what that means for us booktubers and so you'll see. Well, let's get into it. So YA literature is immensely popular here in Booktube, which is actually a very incredible thing, and you will think so when I'm finished as well. And even though I fall in the more critical type of the booktuber and I don't love every YA book that comes out, I don't want this video to be a trope trashing, YA smashing kind of video, even though, occasionally they can be fun to watch. I don't want to do that today. I want to talk to you about the critical approach at YA literature, but in a non-smashing, more academic kind of way. So the inspiration for this video actually came to me while reading Nevernight by J. Christoph, which I'm almost finished. I have 50 pages to go, and I was not expecting to like this book as much as I do, and I will let you know more about my feelings in the review that I am doing next week. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I really like this. I really do. It's a good book. I will leave links for you to all the articles that I consulted in the description below. I will also draw on my knowledge that I have assembled through my university courses because I am studying German and literature because I am going to be a teacher, and of course YA literature plays a huge part in schools. I can comprise a list of books that I use for my studies, but that will be a lot of work, and I'm seeing that most of you are from the US, the UK or Australia or other places in the world that are not German speaking countries. I didn't do that, but if you specifically ask for it, I will do it, of course, just so you know why I talk a lot about things that are not in these articles. So let's first define young adult literature very briefly, because so we're all on the same page and just know what we're all talking about. According to the Young Adult Library Association, which is a division of the American Library Association, young adult literature is aimed at 12 to 18-year-olds and ranges across all genres. But what they all have in common is that there are usually very high emotional stakes for the protagonist. Let's first look at a few numbers to undermine my statement that YA literature is immensely successful, because it is not just a success here on Booktube, it's a success in the real world as well. From 2002 to 2012, the publications of YA literature each year more than doubled. Around 4,700 books per year in 2002 to more than 10,000 books per year in 2012. That's a crazy amount of books. And in 2015, YA literature made $4.27 billion net revenue in the US alone. But trends in the US market also mark a trend in literature worldwide, because a lot of the translated literature is originally English, and the publication market in the US is huge. For instance, let's very briefly look at Germany, because that's where I live. In 2015, there were 10,197 books translated. 6,031 of those were of English origin. YA literature has a 15% market share here in Germany, and 19% of all YA literature published in Germany in 2015 was translated, most of it from English. And that is just something that I experience every time I walk into a bookshop, because I recognize titles that I've seen for month and month on Booktube in English. I suddenly see them in German in our bookshops. And that is beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. So with these numbers you see, YA literature is immensely popular, is an ever-increasing market. So now let's talk a little bit about the history of YA literature, because it's been around for a lot longer than you'd think. YA literature actually can trace back to the 12th century. Now that was the time when most people were illiterate. That was also before the invention of the printing press. That means that every book had to be copied by hand, which made them incredibly expensive. YA literature at that time was aimed at nobility. That was a very, very, very small percentage of population. And it was very far from what we now understand as YA literature. It has mostly educational purposes, conveying common knowledge and societal standards. Not much changed until the 18th century. There was not much fiction in YA literature back then. But that all changed with the Enlightenment and the increasing literacy of the population. And with that came the commercialization of the book trade. So at the end of the 18th century, there was a change for fiction in YA literature, but still with educational purposes. And from 1815 to 1840, YA literature gained in popularity. At the beginning of the 19th century, there was a counter-movement wanting to free YA literature from the educational purpose in which it was stuck until then, arguing for the artistic values that YA literature should have. By the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, the common themes that were conveyed in YA literature were national values and values of the middle class or bourgeoisie. I just made this connection in my course the other day, that these people reading or growing up with stories empathizing their nation and villainizing everything other were the people that then, 20 years later, in their teens or in their 20s, started First World War. Then, 20 years later, in their 40s, participated in World War II. And I just find that fascinating, how the values grew up in as children, and they were conveyed through their literature as children, played such a big part in their lives. And I wonder if that was an influential factor in their mentality when they were, starting these wars. But that's a topic for another time. It's just something that I was wondering about. Anyways, let's get back to the topic. It took until the 1960s that YA literature was actually recognized as its own thing. That was the time of the Cold War, and YA literature was used, you could almost say abused, for political, social and societal education, which resulted in a number of issue books, which I'm not the biggest fan of, to be honest. But the YA literature that we know today was really just developed in the 1980s, with topics getting a lot more complex and the narrative getting a lot better. By that time, the goals were less of educational purpose and more literary socialization or reading socialization. Now you might ask, what is that? So literature socialization is basically a process that lasts from the first contact that an individual has with literature until this individual's death. It's a lifelong process. In short, reading socialization is the relationship that an individual has with literature in context with society. So that means the values for reading and literature that society has are influencing the values of reading and literature that of the individual, and vice versa. But that is just a very short description. This topic is huge, reading socialization, and the most important factor for children for their reading socialization is actually a family, and how literature and reading is valued in the family. For instance, in a family where father and mother are frequently reading, are communicating about their reading experiences with the child, maybe reading to the child will experience reading as something gratifying, as a behavior that is valued and as something that is fun. Whereas in a household or in a family where reading is not valued, that mother and father are not reading, are not communicating about books, are not reading to the child will not value reading and literature as the other child does. Because reading is so important in our society, that can result in, more problems in school with, learning to read and everything. That most important factor of influence regarding reading socialization shifts in teenage years to the peers and friends of that teenager, providing recommendations for books and the communications about books. And that is why I found Booktube such an incredible concept, because I think it really can encourage younger people to read, because it just provides a space to communicate about books that we read and to find like-minded people that read and love the same books as I do, or don't love the same books as I do. That can also be a connecting experience if you find someone who really doesn't like the same things that you don't like. We should also not underestimate the influence that YA literature has on teenagers, because that is a time of life when there are a lot of changes, there's a lot of personal growth and development, and YA literature really can help building the ability to empathize with other people, encourage imagination, just the ability to talk about literature or to participate in a discussion, just create a literary taste. Reading YA literature can also help develop reading, writing and listening skills, and all of that, developing all these abilities is called creating literature understanding or literary understanding. You see, YA literature is incredibly influential in teenage years, but because YA literature is so influential in these very crucial years for personal development, I think we really as booktubers have an obligation, a duty you could almost say, to look at YA literature critically, because not all YA literature is actually of good quality. Now, in my research for this video, I found it incredibly difficult to find criteria regarding quality YA books. As a reviewer, things that I look at when I review books is interesting plot and premise, which, you know, should be there, authentic characters, the world building, is it understandable, is it imaginative, does the world have rules and consequences, and then the writing, even though that is highly subjective, there's just some quality of writing should be there, you know. And these are kind of wishy-washy points, I do recognize that, but it's incredibly difficult to pinpoint exactly the criteria that makes a quality book and a quality YA book, for that matter. I cannot give you a definite answer to what is a quality YA book. I wish I could, but I can't. I think that is a discussion that we need to have here on Booktube, and I think that is a discussion that will never come to a conclusion. You know what I mean? Because so many of these points are just so subjective. Plot and premise that I find very interesting and fascinating is something that another person won't find fascinating and interesting. What I'm trying to say is, YA literature is very influential, and Booktube is a fantastic concept. I think Booktube really has the chance to encourage people in reading and encourage young adults in reading and help them connect with other people, and is really a chance for reading socialization and encouraging younger people to read more. And you guys have no idea how much I love this concept of Booktube, to connect via the internet over books. It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful concept, and I wish I had that when I was a teenager. My life would have been so much easier, because that is something that probably a lot of you can relate to, is that as a teenager sometimes you just feel misunderstood in your day-to-day life, and to have a group of people on the internet that love the same thing that you do and that you can talk to about the romantic ships that you have is such a great thing, and suddenly you feel taken seriously. And I think that's what we should do with YA literature, because too many times I feel it's a little bit disregarded. YA literature is such a important thing in young adults' life. I think we here in Booktube need to take YA literature seriously, and we need to talk about YA literature critically. Now, I don't really have the answer to what makes a good YA book, but that is a conversation that we need to have. That is a conversation that we need to have as a community with each other, and that's a conversation that I think we will never find a conclusion for. And a lot of us do that already. A lot of book reviewers really talk about YA critically, and I find that so lovely. The point of my video actually was to show you how influential YA literature actually is and can be, and what a beautiful possibility we have here on Booktube in encouraging people to read. I hope this video was kind of understandable and not too all over the place. So please, if you can add anything to the conversation about what actually is a good YA book, what actually is criteria to determine what a good YA book is, what is good quality in YA, then please join the conversation below. I would love to hear from you, and please tell me what you think about YA literature and YA literature here on Booktube, and the approach of Booktubers towards YA literature. That's all that I want to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hate to do that, but if you could please like and share and subscribe or something like that, that would be great. That was it for today. I hope you have an awesome day, and I hope my camera actually recorded this video now. And If not, I will do this again and again and again and again and again and again. I hope you have a lovely day. I hope you see reading something wonderful and magical and beautiful, and I will see you soon. Bye! I deserve some ice cream after this.